So good afternoon. I have the pleasure to present the results of our project together with Birgit Penzer-Stadler and Ola Leifler. So the initial starting point was to address more or less these broad research questions: how to integrate the sustainability for making informed architectural design decisions. And this could be translated into two types of, let's say, sub-questions. So first we have to make relevant, to understand what are the relevant sustainability concerns related to architecting and make these concerns explicit. And second, when we frame these concerns and make explicit, then we have to understand how we measure the impact that the decisions that we make have towards sustainability, and only if we measure such an impact we can understand if the decisions go in the right direction or not, and then we can iterate and improve. So about the starting point of the project, so in fact at the beginning of the sprint we had two projects, this one and a project from Birgit as well, so we merged in project 38. And so because there was a lot of meat and the approach that we were taking were fairly different, so we defined how we would proceed. So what we did is the following approach. So we built upon the previous sprint in Birgit's project that was a collaboration with Yepes and Boeing, and we applied the software architecture assessment framework toolkit that was proposed in the project with Ola and myself on one of the priority areas chosen by the company, so by Yepes and Boeing in the previous project. So concretely, we have two methods here. On the left-hand side, we have a method that is called SUSAF, that is meant to understand, to explore the context of the business of an organization, and then understand what are all the elements that play a role in such a business, and position these elements in 5 dimensions of sustainability. We have a technical dimensions, for instance, in the previous presentation on depth, so observing the depth over time, process or technical, is to observe how sustainable, technically speaking or process speaking, an organization is. So there are the other ones. The traditional is the environmental dimension, so the energy footprint, etc. And SUSAF is grounded in requirements engineering, in which, for instance, the user needs and the client's need of software-intensive system play a role. So in this case, the individual dimension. On the right-hand side, you have something similar, but is more compact and is specifically conceived for software architecture. So we tried to merge these and to position in a sustainability timeline. You have to think in terms of immediate impacts within, for instance, the boundaries or the horizon of the current project, enabling impact reason in terms of outside the horizon of the project, but still relevant to consider in decision making, and systemic impact, for instance, that would change the way we work in the organization or the way we make business, or even society at large. So this is the premise. So we tried to merge these two, not to merge, but to link these two approaches on a sustainability timeline. And what did we do is to take one of the outputs of SUSAF, which was the report that Birgit developed with Yepesen. And from this report, we identified together with the Yepesen, the experts, where to focus upon. So one, to zoom into one specific software-intensive system, and draw basically what we see here is the decision map. So an architectural views that would frame these the architectural relevant concerns for sustainability purposes. And here we see the rule methodologies that then I mentioned also afterwards. We organized the work in a working group. So as you see here as input, there was the project case and the report from the previous project and the SAF toolkit. And then we had a 2 hours working group with 2 experts, and we produced a report with the decision map and the sustainability goals that we could understand from this exercise. So the subdomain that was chosen as most interesting and most promising by the company was responsible flight planning. Of course, everything was online, so we organized the workshop to draw this decision map on Miro. So here you see a screenshot from the instruments that we have been using and the decision map during this workshop. And this is how basically the outcome from the final report. So to give you an idea about the added value here is all the elements in the decision map that you see in the bottom part of the slides are all concerns that, for instance, are relevant for the technical perspective. So, for instance, for these systems, there is a trade-off between the complexity of the system from a technical point of view and the congestions that that is created towards sustainable planning of the flights. But there are also other concerns, like, for instance, the payload, which is how much cargo or how many people you put in a flight, which has clearly an economic impact because you have to operate the flights anyway, but which is a cost, but then you gain the revenues depend on the payload. Or you have other aspects, like, for instance, the level of comfort of the travels from a social perspective of the travelers that fly in such a flights. So with such a decision map, we are to make explicit all these concerns that with the software system, for instance, for operational flight planning, we want to achieve. And we also make explicit the derived goals towards sustainability that are in the ambition of a certain company. For example, in the top right-hand side, we see 2 bullets, which are 2 sustainability goals that we derived from this project. The first one concerns the new European regulation for designing the airspace, basically where the flights can fly in the European airspace. And the related sustainability goals would be to use the software to maximize the responsible air travel, which you can measure in terms of how much awareness we create in the customers about the possibility of responsible traveling, and also with the link on payload in terms of the comfort, but also in terms of how many people and how much cargo we can fly. The second goal, which relates to the feature of operational flight planning, would be to maximize the traffic in the new airspace with the same minimum carbon emissions. So basically, we can, for instance, measure how the new planning with the software features, the new planning can minimize the carbon emissions and squeeze in the same airspace more, let's say, traffic. So as you can imagine, in this case, the impact of the software-intensive systems would be on the enabling certain sustainability goals. So if we know which features of the systems are responsible for which sustainability goals, then we can also measure this planned impact and then see if we achieve the goal. So what next? So from this exercise, what we, for instance, understood is the list from the decision map, the list of sustainability, quality, and design concerns relevant for the software architecture. And what we are doing now as a follow-up is to, we translate in these templates that you see in the bottom side, we translate all these concerns into quality attributes to build a sustainability quality model. So such a quality model will include definitions and measures that will be extracted from the current practice of the company, so that we start building a suite of metrics and KPIs that can be reusable across multiple versions of the same system, but also within the same domain, hopefully. So on the 18th of this month, of December, we will have a second workshop meant to populate this sustainability quality model for further reuse. In this case, we address the second sub-question, which is how to measure the sustainability impact. Also a reflection from this merging of projects from SUSAF and SAF was as follows. We understood that we can, with these instruments, we can better carry out informed architecture, so better plan for a certain impacts that we can have as an objective. And in this way, better combine also the strategy of the company for digitalization and digital transformation with, at the same time, certain sustainability goals. For instance, for transportation, it is there are at a European level, at a national level, international level, new regulation that push forward sustainability objectives. So then the different organizations have to match how the software services will allow to match these expectations. But I can imagine that any company that, for instance, wants to create a new business or to innovate in the current market could take the chance of the Sustainable Development Goals and pursue the same direction. Also, in the next steps, what we would like to propose as a new project is to integrate these two instruments, SUSAF and SAF, that come from the first requirements engineering from software architecture, to have a more round-trip engineering. And what we understood from this sprint was that the first is very useful to build the context of the, for instance, the domain or the application domain or a certain system. And within this context, then zoom into different software-intensive systems and their features for architecture decisions. So there are still some work to do to make this integration possible. Next to that, open research remains how to trace explicitly concerns, measures, and the architecture elements. So the elements in the architecture that are really responsible for realizing those concerns and that are used to build the metrics for such measures. Finally, by building these quality models, like we are doing for Jeppesen, we also want to integrate in the current research that we are doing here in the Netherlands with the ISO chapter, the Dutch chapter, to contribute to the new family of standards for system and software quality and architecture evaluations.